恭敬大德神定，为此法会自一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱死离苦得乐，殊人无生。Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to leave suffering and attain bliss, and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati sanmiao sanputoche. Wu shang shen shen wei miao fa, bai qian wan jian nan zao yi. 我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it, and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Namo, quelling disasters, slanting life, medicine master, Buddha. Namo, quelling disasters, lengthening 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 life, medicine master, Buddha. Medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all good knowing advisors, Amitabha, welcome back. Let me get today's slides up. This is lecture number 114. And today is the 2nd of July. Yeah, 2nd of July. Yes. So what we're going to do today, let me put up this slide in case I realize some people were not aware that we have a new time for the class. So I'm just going to leave this slide up. We can do a quick recap of what we did last week. So what we did last week is, as part of the developing loving kindness for yourself, okay, is about recollecting your virtues. And part of it is to recognize the fortunate position that you're in. What position? Well, being able to draw close to the Dharma. And the only reason we have the Dharma is because of the Buddha. And if you have taken refuge, if you have formally recognized the Buddha as your teacher, then that really, excuse me, that most people, when they take refuge, they just know who the Buddha is. They just take for granted that's the Buddha. But not many people understand what that really means. What does it mean to have someone like the Buddha be your teacher? Is the Buddha a kind person? Is he like a god where you have to do things to please the Buddha, in order to be accepted into his good graces? Will the Buddha punish you if you don't follow? If you're not, say, a good Buddhist, will you get punished by the Buddha? What is the Buddha? So, we normally you take refuge. I mean, logically speaking, you take refuge with someone who you have great confidence in. Okay, but like myself, when I took refuge with the Buddha, it wasn't an informed confidence. It was more like blind confidence, like blind faith, faith, blind faith, without really knowing the qualities of the Buddha or what he represents. So what we're doing last week is to try to get to understand the Buddha. Now, if we were to do that seriously, on a serious attempt to try to understand the Buddha, it will probably take at least a few years, So we don't have that much time. We have time, but we don't. I'm not. No, let me see. How do I phrase that? We can't spend that much time. Not yet. Maybe not right now. So right now we are going through the virtues of the Buddha. So he went through who the Buddha was before he became the Buddha, okay, and how he came to be born in Jambudvipa, which is basically for us, as far as Jambudvipa is concerned, as far as we are concerned, Jambudvipa is planet Earth. All right. So just to show that the Buddha is not an ordinary person. Okay, so today what we're going to do is I'm going to have a quick slide about what Shufu says on being able to know the Buddha. Then we're going to have a quick recap on loving kindness. And then originally my plan was to share with you a section of the Lotus Sutra, but I found something else which was very interesting. So I'm going to share that first before we move on to the Lotus Sutra, which will show the true depth of the loving kindness and compassion of the Buddha. But that probably won't be today. That'll probably be next week. Okay. All right. So we're going to go through what Shufu has to say about the Buddha, and then a quick recap about the Brahma, about loving kindness. And then we go into the Buddha's kind of loving kindness. At this point in time, does anyone have any questions or anything they want to bring up? If you do, you can type it into the chat box or unmute your mic. Okay. All right. Let's get started. Okay, so this is what Shufu says. The title is a bit misleading. It says the Venerable Master on Impermanence and the Dharma. That's accurate, but it's also about understanding the Buddha. So I'm just going to read. Shufu says, all of you can count yourselves lucky, for you have searched around and finally come to believe in the Buddha. Faith in the Buddha enables us to attain the ultimate happiness of permanence, joy, true self, and purity. Therefore, we should believe in the Buddha. But it's not enough to say that we believe. We also have to cultivate or practice according to the Dharma. If you believe but don't cultivate, it's like talking about food without eating it or counting the wealth of others. It doesn't benefit you in the least. Okay, what does this mean? Shufu says, if you believe in the Buddha, like you have taken refuge with the Buddha, you have accepted him, you have, basically when we take refuge, we don't really think about it, but if you examine your thought process when you took refuge, we think we take refuge like we humbly go to the Buddha and we kneel to the Buddha. But if you observe your thought process, I'm pretty sure you give the Buddha permission to become your teacher. You know, the Buddha has to first fulfill certain criteria, like, okay, can I trust the Buddha, etc. Maybe not the Buddha, because like Shofu, for me, Shofu had to tick certain boxes in my requirements before I would, in my heart, if I'm honest, I say, okay, now I accept Shufu as my teacher. I give you permission to be my teacher. But that's not something people think about. So you have to, just thought it was interesting. Okay, so Buddhism is not a religion where it is based on salvation. Okay, salvation means someone saves you. You rely on someone's power to help you. So in that kind of religion, all you need is faith. All you need is to believe. And of course, there are certain other conditions that you have to follow. From your faith, you follow certain rules or certain things you have to do and to believe in. But then it's not up to you. The God that you have faith in is all up to him. That is his choice, whether you what happens to you in the afterlife. So Shufu says here, belief is not enough to say that you believe, you have to practice. Why? Because one of the tenets of Buddhism is cause and effect. Okay, you have to do something to get something. So that's why Buddhism is a practice of transformation. When you believe in the Buddha, then you will practice the Dharma. Because if you don't believe in the Buddha, obviously you won't practice in the Dharma. So faith in Buddhism is not an all be all kind of thing. Faith in Buddhism is just a stepping stone for you to accept the Dharma. For most people, gradually, you take refuge. After that, you take the precepts. Then when you have time, you might take the 8 precepts, try out the 8 precepts, then maybe take the Bodhisattva precepts, slowly according to your ability. And that's where the transformation happens, when you change yourself. And then when you change yourself, then the effects come. Okay? So Buddhism is about cause and effect. It's about transforming yourself. It's not about magic. It's not about having someone more powerful determining if you get saved or not. Okay, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cannot snap their fingers and get you enlightened. If they could do that, believe me, they would have done that a long time ago, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to all of you, and you all wouldn't be sitting wherever you are listening. We will all be enlightened by the Buddha's graces. But it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Okay, all right. Now, let's go to the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra and look at the qualities of loving kindness. Okay, just a quick recap of loving kindness. It says with the mind. Okay, so this is what I'm going to read right now. It's a very common passage from many sutras. So it's the Buddha saying with a mind associated with loving kindness, or sometimes it's translated as a mind imbued with loving kindness. And what is that? It's free of enmity, free of hostility, free of rivalry, free of malice, extended, expanded, immense, and well cultivated. The bhikshu intentionally includes in this mind of loving kindness the beings of universes in the eastern direction. Then he intentionally includes in this mind of loving kindness the beings of the universes of the 10 directions, etc., etc. Okay, so what does this mean? All right, we break it down. It says with the mind associated with loving kindness, it says Maitri. Maitri is the Sanskrit word for loving kindness. It says Maitri is an mental event. That means it happens in your mind, capable of counteracting the corruptions contained in the mind, namely hatred, hostility, avarice, lust, and the other passions. Thus, when the purifying pearl is placed in dirty water, it becomes clear. It is said, if you have a wish-fulfilling pearl, all dragon kings apparently have a wish-fulfilling pearl. You can take it as a metaphor for your Buddha nature, okay? Or you can take it literally, because I think wish fulfilling pearls is a thing, although not within our realm of reality, our current realm of reality. It is said, Shofu says, when you take a wish fulfilling pearl, if you're lucky enough to have one, it's called wish fulfilling pearl because it grants you all your wishes. It's like Aladdin's lamp. It grants you all your wishes. So you put a pearl in dirty water, it cleans, the water becomes pure. Yeah, so that's what it means here. So when you have loving kindness and you do it properly, you will find that it pushes out hatred, hostility, avarice, lust, and the other passions like jealousy and all that. All right. Okay. Next, with a mind free of enmity and free of hostility. So in the Shastra, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva says that, he says, let us suppose that with or without reason, one hates someone. If one wants to insult him, curse him, strike him, or rob him, this is enmity. If one waits for the proper moment and given the chance, one torments him with all one's strength, this is hostility. Since Maitri counteracts both these things, it is said to be free of enmity and hostility. Okay, so now you know the difference between what enmity is and what hostility is. To me, they're the same. Maybe one is more severe than the other. Okay. And then the next one, with a mind free of rivalry and free of malice. So hostility is rivalry. It means you have a competitor or someone you just don't like. The first offensive movement is of hostility. In time, hostility becomes rivalry. When one inflicts torment by means of physical and vocal actions, this is malice. Furthermore, the fatter hostility is called enmity. When enmity increases, is prolonged and becomes attached to, but not yet fixed in the mind, it takes the name of hostility and also rivalry. When the mind is determined and no longer has any scruples, this is called malice. When the mind is determined and no longer has any... Oh, okay. All right. You got that? Okay, don't ask me to explain. Because it's like all the same. Okay. Then because the power of Maitri Chitta means a mind of loving kindness. Chitta means mind. So Maitri Chitta, power of a mind of with loving kindness, rejects, abandons, and leaves behind these three things. It is said to be free of enmity, free of hostility, free of rivalry, and free of malice. The Buddha praised Maitri Chitta in regard to this fourfold exemption. All beings fear suffering and are attached to happiness. Enmity is cause and condition for suffering, and Maitri is cause and condition for happiness. Beings who hear it said that this concentration of loving kindness can chase away suffering and bring happiness. There's a typo. Bring happiness, become mindful, brave, and full of energy to practice this meditative stabilization. And this is why they are without enmity, without hostility, without rivalry, and without malice. And right now, what we're doing is we're finding out how to do this finding out how to do this well. Okay, so apparently I found out today there are three kinds of loving kindness. Okay, so the mind of loving kindness, of which we have just spoken, is that which has beings as object. It is found mainly among worldly people, that means you and me, practicing the trances here means the dhyanas, or in adepts on the path of practice who have not yet destroyed the impurities. So the first kind of loving kindness is mundane loving kindness. It's a kind of loving kindness that we are trying to figure out how to do well if you haven't done it well yet. Okay. Then let's move on to the second kind. It says, Arhats, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Buddhas practice a loving kindness that has things as object. Having destroyed the concept of self and eliminated notions of identity and difference, these holy individuals consider only the objects of enjoyment continually coming from causes and conditions. When they think about beings with loving kindness, they think only of the emptiness coming continually from causes and conditions together. The being is the 5 empty skandhas. When they think with loving kindness, they are thinking about these 5 skandhas. Okay, what does this mean? Okay. Arhats, Prachika Buddhas, and Buddhas refers to sages, people who have overcome birth and death. They have overcome the notion of a self. They no longer mistake the 5 skandhas for a self, for them to be the self. What are the 5 skandhas? Form, formation, consciousness. Let me see. I'm supposed to be a master student in Buddhist studies. Form, formation, consciousness. 4 and 5. Oh my God. Can someone type it in if you know? If you don't, it's okay. But the 5 aggregates makes up our body. Okay, maybe this is an easier way to explain because this is the only way I know how to explain. The 5 aggregates make up our body and our mind, which is what we think, what we take to be us, because we don't know any better. But it is not self. Okay, that's the first mistake we do. Because of ignorance, we think that we are the sum of our thoughts, and we are made up of our body. We get attached to our bodies. But for sages, they realize that no, it is not them. So second paragraph, I said when they think about beings with loving kindness, so when they see us, normal people, what they see is only an accumulation of conditions put together for this body in this particular lifetime. So, and they don't get confused by that. So what happens is kind of like, say you meet an actor, okay? And you've seen this actor act in many, many films and movies before, okay? And say it's Keanu Reeves. I hope everyone knows who Keanu Reeves is. So you've seen him act in many, many movies, but you do not confuse the roles that he plays to be him. So you can say that every role he plays is kind of like a new life, a new rebirth for him. And every time in a new life, he has a new name, he has a new identity, he plays someone else. But it's just a coming together of causes and conditions. And as an actor, you don't confuse the role to be you. Okay, you don't end up thinking that you are this person that you're supposed to be playing, right? So sages are like that. They don't confuse their current body and the thoughts to be them, but we do. Okay, so but when they see us, they just see us as us like an actor, right, in this particular lifetime, inhabiting this body with this name, but they don't see us for that. They see past. That's why they see us as the being is the 5 empty skandhas. Okay, and then when we move on, there's one more. It says, but beings themselves ignore this emptiness of things. We don't know any better because we're ignorant. It says, and with their whole heart always want to find happiness. That's us. So the holy individuals of whom we are speaking take pity on them and make them find happiness as they wish, but only from the conventional point of view. This is what is called loving kindness having things as object. So basically, all right, if someone is thinking, they might be thinking, says, why if Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arahats and Prachaka Buddhas, all these sages, if they see everything as empty, as non-self, or not, I would say not self, they see everything as not self, why are they helping living beings if they see living beings as empty? Okay, if the 5 skandhas are not self, and Ron just type in 5 skandhas are form, feeling, cognition, formation, and consciousness. Thank you, Ron. Well, look at it this way, okay? If there's someone that you care for, and that someone is sleeping or maybe in a coma, and that person is having a nightmare, you know that the person is undergoing a nightmare or a series of nightmares, and they might be full of affliction and suffering. From your point of view, you know it's not real. The nightmare is not real. It's just a fabrication of the mind. And whatever harm they're undergoing in the nightmare is not real, right? But at the same time, you also know that although the suffering that they're undergoing in the nightmare is not real, the mental suffering that they're undergoing is. As far as they are concerned, your dear one is concerned, they are suffering, which is why Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, they try their best to help us, although they see through the 5 skandhas. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right. Okay, so let's go to the third kind. Third kind is, it says, as for the loving kindness that has no object, this is the one that only the Buddhas possess. Why? The mind of the Buddha does not rest on the condition or on the condition. It does not rest on the past, the future, or the present. The Buddhas know all objects are not real, are erroneous and deceptive. This is why their mind is without object. Beings who do not know the true nature of things. They wander through the 5 destinies. Their minds are attached to things. They make distinctions, and we take certain things and reject other things. And so the Buddha used the wisdom of the true nature of things and make beings obtain it. This is a loving kindness without object. So basically, the Buddha sees the whole nature of samsara as it is, which is everything is conditioned, everything is impermanent, and everything is non-self. Not self. Yeah. So we don't see that, but the Buddhas do. So that's why the Buddha being able to see through everything as impermanent, as conditioned, and as not non-self, they can. The Buddha has this third kind of loving kindness. Okay, so now let's go in more into detail about. So I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, metaphorically speaking, and investigate both loving kindness and mindfulness of the Buddha at the same time through the subject of the Buddha's loving kindness. The Buddha has loving kindness, but in the Buddha's case, it is not normal loving kindness. Okay, it is great loving kindness, Maha Maitri. Maha Maitri. What makes it different from a loving kindness? Okay, so there's a question in the Shastra. It starts off with a question. It says, great loving kindness and great compassion being so, what is lesser loving kindness and lesser compassion? All right. So the answer from Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, he says, the loving kindness and compassion found in the Buddha's mind are called great. Those found in the minds of other people are called lesser. Lesser loving kindness gives happiness to beings only in theory. Actually, it has no happy effect. Lesser compassion considers the various physical and mental sufferings of beings and has pity on them, but is incapable of freeing them from suffering. Now, any of you who has ever had someone that is important to you undergo any form of suffering or sickness, you will understand this. You will feel helpless because there is nothing that you can do to directly remove the person's suffering. So this is what it means. It says only in theory. So our practice of loving kindness is only in our minds. We, of course, it may affect. It will have a positive effect on in our relationships with others, but the practice itself does not. That means when you're just sitting there contemplating loving kindness, it does not. All right, is only in theory. Okay. On the other hand, the Buddha's great loving kindness not only wishes that beings find happiness, but also assures them of happy things. It comes with a guarantee. Okay. And great compassion not only has pity for the suffering of beings, but also frees them from sufferings. So when the Buddha has a thought, he can back it up. You know, he, what's that saying? He's, I can't recall that saying, but there's another saying that comes to mind. Put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. something like that. So it says, furthermore, in worldly people, Shravakas, Pracheka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, so even Bodhisattvas, says the loving kindness and compassion are described as lesser, whereas in the Buddhas, they attain the epithet of great. Okay, don't mistakenly take this to mean, oh, Bodhisattvas have inferior loving kindness. No. Bodhisattvas have great loving kindness too, but not as great as the Buddha. Okay, but far better than what we have. All right. Okay. So in addition, this great loving kindness is extended to all the beings of the 10 directions and 3 times, including insects. So no one escapes the Buddha's loving kindness. Great loving kindness assures the happiness of all beings. Great compassion uproots the suffering of all beings. Great loving kindness gives beings the causes and conditions for happiness. Great compassion gives beings the causes and conditions that eliminate suffering. Suppose there is a man whose sons are in prison about to undergo great torture. If their father, with loving kindness and compassion, uses some skillful means to prevent their suffering, that is great compassion. If, having freed them from suffering, he then gives his sons the 5 objects of enjoyment, that is great loving kindness. Okay, so you see what's the difference? Preventing suffering or removing suffering, that has to do with compassion. Making people happy, that's loving kindness. And he says when he gives the sons the 5 objects of enjoyment, what are they? That has to do with our 5 senses. So meaning what the eyes can see, what we can touch, smell, taste, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, smell. Yeah. So anything that we can to do with the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, these are the 5 sensual objects. Okay. Loving kindness penetrates the marrow of the bones and the mind never renounces it. That means proper loving kindness, like the loving kindness of the Buddha. The Buddha embodies great loving kindness. It means he's suffused with loving kindness. Suppose that the beings of the entire cosmos had fallen into the 3 bad destinies. 3 bad destinies are the hell realms, the animal realms, and the hungry ghost realm. And in their place, a single man underwent the sufferings of each of them. Suppose that after having repaid these sufferings, this man took the happiness of the 5 objects of enjoyment, the happiness of the trances and absorptions, the supreme happiness of this world, and distributed them liberally to beings to make up for it. Okay, so really, how you say, a real exaggeration, but really selfless behavior. You undertake the suffering of everyone, and not only that, you give them all the happiness from sensual objects that you can get, and beyond that, which is the happiness from meditation, trances, and absorptions, means the dhyana. The first dhyana, actually, you get a sense of joy that is literally out of this world, because nothing in this world can give you that same sense of joy. Yeah. So you give you can't give that joy. You know, there's no way you can give that joy, because for one to experience it, you have to achieve the first dhyana. But imagine if you can, like this guy. Okay, so he distributes it to everyone in this world. Says, well then, this man would not reach the 10 million pass. Actually, should be part 10 million part of the loving kindness and compassion of the Buddha. So despite doing all this, it doesn't even match to 1/10 million part of the Buddha. Why? Because the happiness of the world is deceptive, false, and does not free one from samsara. Because it's still worldly. It has nothing to do with what this man can do, although it is how you say, very commendable. It does not help anyone end birth and death. So you're continually within samsara. Which is different from the Buddha's loving kindness, which is with one intention, to help you overcome birth and death. Okay, all right. So the loving kindness and compassion are the root of the enlightenment of the Buddhas. Why is that? The Bodhisattva sees beings tormented by all the sufferings. suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death, bodily suffering and mental suffering, suffering in this life and in the next life. Feeling great loving kindness and great compassion, he comes to save beings from these sufferings, and subsequently he forms a resolution of seeking Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Okay? By the power of his great loving kindness and great compassion, in the course of samsara in innumerable, incalculable lifetimes, his courage never sinks. By the power of his great loving kindness and his great compassion, and although he could have attained nirvana long ago, it does not give the evidence of it. This is why among all the attributes of the Buddha, loving kindness and compassion are great. If he did not have this great loving kindness and this great compassion, he would enter nirvana too soon. So it's because of living beings that the Buddha does not enter nirvana, although technically he already has. But like Shufu made a vow, anyone who takes refuge with him, actually Shufu has a secret vow. He says, even if you don't take refuge with me, I will wait for you to become a Buddha until I become I'll wait for you to become a Buddha first before I myself become a Buddha. Buddha means entering nirvana. Okay, so loving kindness is the foundation. Loving kindness and compassion is the foundation of the Buddha, which is why we are spending so much time on loving kindness. All right. Next, when he attains enlightenment, he realizes innumerable, very profound concentrations, trances, absorptions, and liberations. So this, I've been mentioning dhyanas. You will find a Sanskrit word called samadhi, or proper or right concentration. This is what it refers to. Since experiencing this pure happiness, he abandons it and does not keep it. He goes into the villages and the towns and preaches the Dharma with all kinds of avadanas and nidanas. These are ways of speaking. He changes his form and guides beings by an infinity of vocal sounds. He endures curses, injuries, criticisms, and slander on the part of beings, and goes so far as to become a female musician. All that thanks to his great loving kindness and great compassion. So we will see this in all the stories Shufu gave us about all the bodhisattvas, everything they have to endure, like Bodhidharma. If you look at the patriarchs, for example, their lives are so hard. They lead incredibly, their lives are full of hardship. I won't call it suffering, because suffering depends on the mind. If you think it's suffering, but hardship is physical. And patriarchs, all of them, most of them have endured incredible hardships in their life, all because they want to save living beings. And if you look at the Jataka tales, which are tales of the Buddha's past lives, which he told us himself, you will find that life after life, he always, not always, there are countless stories where he would sacrifice himself for the sake of living beings. For example, when he met a tiger, and I think the tiger had cubs and was severely emancipated because they couldn't get anything to eat. I think at the time the Buddha was an elephant, I believe, or a hunter. I'm not sure, but maybe not hunter. That wouldn't be consistent. But what happened was the Buddha threw himself off the cliff so that his body would become food for the tiger and her cubs. Yeah, many stories like that, like the story of the rabbit who wanted to sacrifice himself, and which is why if you look at the full moon, you see an image of the rabbit. Yeah. Okay. Furthermore, the epithet great attached to great loving kindness and great compassion does not come from the Buddha. So the Buddha doesn't say he's great. It is beings who describe them thus. In the same way, the lion that is very strong never boasts of the greatness of its strength, but all the beasts remember it. I mean, if you're strong, you're strong. You don't have to tell people how strong you are. A man who had two friends was thrown into prison for some misdeed. One of his friends provided the necessities and the other died in his place. Everybody declared that the friend who died in his place was full of loving kindness and compassion. It is the same for the Buddha who from lifetime to lifetime has sacrificed his head, eyes, marrow, and skull for beings. So when the Buddha sacrifices, it's not a metaphor, it's not a simile, it actually happens. Yeah, many lifetimes. But for I'm not saying that how you say, for bodhisattvas, okay, when they are able to do things like that, because they've seen through the five skandhas, they know it is non-self, so they don't get attached to their bodies the way we do. Okay, I'm not saying that every time the Buddha sacrificed his body, gave up his body in order to benefit living beings, that it was an easy thing to do, because the tales, the Jataka tales and all that, they don't say at what point the Buddha became a sage. So I would assume that every time the Buddha sacrificed his body, it was not an easy thing to do. It was driven by true loving kindness and compassion. Okay, but in this Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, at one section, it does say that a bodhisattva is able to do great acts of helping living beings, because if you realize that your body is not you, and you can manage your attachment to the body, and you understand cause and effect, you have wisdom, and you realize that if you give up your body for a good cause and you are sincere, you're not greedy, it is the same as say you have a car, you have a lousy car, maybe a 30-year-old car, 40-year-old car, a car as old as you, and the car breaks down all the time. It is a death trap. You might die. The car might kill you every time you drive it. You know, the steering wheel might come off, the brakes may not work. You turn right, the car goes left. And someone comes to you and say, hey, if you give me your car, in return, I will give you a brand new Mercedes. Anyone would take the offer, right? So to a bodhisattva or to a sage, that's how they see the opportunity to give. When you can give up something that you know will betray you, your body is going to betray you, it's going to make you die. You give up something which is impermanent, which is not self, and something which brings you suffering. And when you give it up, you know that you're going to get something far better in return. Who would not do that, right? So that's kind of how bodhisattvas would can do certain things. But don't let that take away from the all the acts that the Buddha had to go through, the sages go through, which are true acts of which has true loving kindness and compassion behind it. Okay, all right. Because until we get to that stage, we don't really understand. All right. Beings hearing and seeing these things in one accord have called him the great loving kindness one and the great compassionate one. Nobody fully knows the power of the Buddha's wisdom, but in his great loving kindness and great compassion, the Buddha, from lifetime to lifetime, sacrifices his life and abandons the bliss of the concentrations in order to save beings, and this everyone knows. The Buddha's wisdom is cognizable by induction. It cannot be cognized directly. This means that when it comes to the Buddha's wisdom, we have to use our imagination or logic, but directly we have no way of knowing. But his loving kindness and compassion are visible to the eye and audible to the ear. They are cognizable, for the Buddha has uttered his lion's roar several times. Furthermore, great loving kindness and great compassion are loved by everyone. They are like a delicious medicine that people like to swallow. Right? Wisdom, I should put a however there, but wisdom is like an unpleasant medicine that many do not like at all, because wisdom tells you have to do the right thing, and that can be very hard. But because they like loving kindness and compassion so much, they have described them as great. Furthermore, there are hardly any beings who are able to believe and accept the Buddha's wisdom. In contrast, great loving kindness and great compassion are of such a different kind that everybody can believe them and accept them. Okay. As they have seen a picture of them or heard the voice, they can believe and accept them, and since they have derived much benefit from them, they call them great loving kindness and great compassion. Great wisdom has as its nature the relinquishment, the rejection of dharmas, meaning you have to let go, which is very hard to do. So that's wisdom. Great loving kindness and great compassion have as their nature pity for and service to beings. This pity and service are loved by all beings. That is why they call them great loving kindness and great compassion of the Buddha. So you notice all these ways of describing the Buddha. There is never once that the Buddha is painted in a harsh manner. Okay, just keep that in mind. All right, there's never once that the Buddha has a temper, the Buddha has any jealousy, that the Buddha will punish you, or make you unhappy to try to teach you something. No. Okay, the Buddha is extremely reliable. You can always rely on the Buddha's kindness and compassion. All right. Okay, moving on. Since the Buddha possesses such qualities, one should recollect the Buddha, which is what we're doing right now. Okay, Shravakas and Bodhisattvas who practicing the concentration of recollection of the Buddha, that's the Sanskrit term for that, Buddha Nusmriti Samadhi. So Samadhi is proper concentration. Do not recollect merely the Dhammakaya with its many Buddha qualities. If I'm not mistaken, Dhammakaya is the Dharma realm. I have to find that out. Okay. They must make the following reflections. Okay, so how do you want to recollect the Buddha properly? This is one recommended technique. Okay, it says the Buddha is able to explain all dharmas in all their aspects. This is why he's called omniscient. Dharmas here means every single thing that exists is small d. Okay, if you see the word Dharma with a capital D, that means the teachings of the Buddha. Small d means every single phenomena in the world, from the smallest aspect of that has any physical property to whatever it is that's on the other end of the spectrum, and everything else that's in between, invincible or whatever it is, the Buddha understands it. Short answer to how can the Buddha understand everything? It is because it comes from the mind. It's all mind-made. Okay. Short answer. Long answer, I am not equipped to give you a long answer. So you just have to settle for the short answer. Okay. Number 2, in accordance with reality, he analyzes and skillfully preaches all dharmas. This is why he's called seeing everything. Okay. Number 3, by direct perception, he cognizes all dharmas. This is why he is called the one whose knowledge and vision are unhindered. So by now, you probably, if you know the titles of the Buddha, you probably figured it out. Mindfulness of the Buddha can be connected to the titles or the names of the Buddha. Okay, he loves all beings impartially. This is why he is called the being of great loving kindness and great compassion. He possesses great loving kindness and great compassion. This is why he is called Savior of the world. He comes by a path that is in accord with the truth. This is why he is called Tathagata. He has the right to receive the worship of the entire world. This is why he is called Arhat. He is endowed with a wisdom free of error. This is why he is called Samyak Sambuddha. His morality, his concentration, and his wisdom are complete. It is why he is called Vidyacharana Sampanna, endowed with sciences and practices. He does not turn back. This is why he is called Sugata. Okay, this turning back is not turning your body around. This is retreat. in retreat, meaning, when you make a vow, you stick to it. When you say you want to give up certain thing, you really give it up. You stop doing it. You don't back and forth. Maybe I'll try tomorrow again, or I'll give myself 3 months. That doesn't happen. Yeah. Okay. He cognizes the general characteristics and the specific characteristics of the world. This is why he's called Lokavid, knower of the world. Okay. For most of us who for all this may be new, you don't have to go through all this in detail to practice mindfulness of the Buddha. All this is just meant to paint a picture of who the Buddha is. We haven't finished yet. There will be more next week. So it's to paint a brushstroke of who the Buddha is. And if you can, from an emotional, from a, from a, emotional, from a point of understanding or knowledge or logical premise, understand the Buddha, and then let that translate into an emotion, and you allow the emotion to suffuse you when you recollect the Buddha. That can be the practice as well. Okay, so you don't have to memorize all these small little details. If you can, that would be very good. But if you are not the kind of person, then you can use all these details to form a picture of the Buddha. Okay, that is more important. All right. He says beings by the threefold teaching. This is why he's called, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, Master of Gods and Men, or also known as Teachers of Gods and Men. He is endowed with all the aspirations. This is why he's called Bhagavat, endowed with qualities. He is endowed with the 10 powers. This is why he's called Dhira, or strong. He has obtained the 4 fearlessnesses. This is that how you pronounce 4 fearlessnesses? Yes. This is why he's called Purushashima, or man-lion. He has obtained immense profound knowledge. This is why he is called Mahaguna Sagara, great ocean of qualities. All these statements are without obstacles. This is why he is said to be like the wind. He has neither aversion nor fondness for all that is beautiful or ugly. That is why he is said to be like the earth. It is said the earth does not reject anything. It accepts everything. And he burns the kindling of all the fetters. That is why he is said to be like fire. He has skillfully destroyed all the lingering traces of the afflictions. This is why he is said to be fully liberated. His abode being supreme, he is called Bhagavat. Since the Buddha possesses such qualities, one should recollect the Buddha. Okay, all right. So we are at the end of slides for today, which is a bit surprising. I thought I wouldn't be able to finish. Does anyone have anything to bring up? Any questions or anything you want to share? No? Okay, while I'm waiting, I was asked a question this week. So the question is about the practice of mantras. Okay, so let me see. Let me read the question. Let me find the question. Okay, the question is, when it comes to practicing mantras, like reciting the mantras, are they all like in the secret school or the esoteric school, where there are a number of guidelines or rules and regulations? For example, in other beliefs, they say that if you want to recite certain mantras or prayers, you have to be pure in terms of your diet, or you have to bathe with flower scented, or you bathe with water with flowers. In Malaysia, there's a custom for the Muslims for certain things. Let me see what else. For example, in the Shurangama Sutra, it says if you practice the Shurangama mantra, then you have to stay away from the 5 pungent plants, because if you don't, it renders your practice ineffective. Okay, so okay, Saha, you have a question? Yes, Saha, please. And I'll see if I can answer your question now or wait till next week.
Amitabha, Dharma Master. My question is, when it comes to practicing your mantras every day, I don't stick to one specific mantra. I try different ones all the time. Like, for example, Great Compassion Mantra, Shrangama Mantra. And sometimes I can chant the Shrangama Mantra, but sometimes I just don't have time. So I just go with the short mantra for the Shrangama. But when listening to Master, he said that you have to stick to one specific practice that suits you for the rest of your life. And how do we know which one is the one for us? Because all 88 Dharma doors are profound. None is higher than the other, but we have to find the one that is only specific for us, that suits us and our lifestyle. So can you please elaborate more on that? Thank you.
When you said you heard that from Dharma Master, was that me?
I think I heard it from Master Suan Hua when he was talking about all the Dharma doors, all the 88 Dharma doors are profound. None is higher than the other. And he also said you have to find the one that is specific suit for you. That is for you. That is your Dharma door. And that is the wonderful Dharma door. It's mentioned in the Lotus Sutra.
Okay, all right. Because Shufu said that, I'm not going to go against what Shufu says. Just kidding. Okay, so when Shufu says something like that, or when you hear someone says you stick to one, don't keep on changing your Dharma door or your practice. Stick to one, or you never get anywhere. Okay, what that means is the practice of stilling your mind. When you are, sitting in meditation, that applies. When you're trying to calm the mind down because you want to enter the dhyanas, that applies. So you can't be sitting there, first 10 minutes, you are reciting a particular mantra or counting your breath or reciting Amitabha's name, and then you get bored, and then 10-20 minutes later you switch to something else, and then you tell yourself, oh, this is not working, and then 10-20 minutes later or 5 minutes later you switch to something else because you think it might work better. That is for those kind of situations. Because when you're trying to still the mind, you want to hold the mind down from false thinking. And all those things that just happen that causes one to move between different practices, like counting the breath or different mantras or reciting the sutras, all those come from a place of false thinking, of seeking, of not being able to calm down. So the only way you can get your mind to be single-minded is to stick to one practice. But sometimes to find out if that practice is suitable for you or not takes a bit of trial and error. So you will only find out if you try and if you are changing all the time, you never figure it out. So you only find out if you actually invest some time and try something long enough. Okay, you try something long enough until, all right, and this is the secret behind all this, until you realize that it's not really the Dharma door. The Dharma door is an expedient, it's helpful. So for someone who say is very distracted, they might need something very long, like the Shurangama mantra. Someone who can calm down very easily and get concentrated might only need Om Mani Padme Hum, the 6-syllable mantra instead of the Shurangama mantra. Everyone is different. But then you come to a point when you realize the secret to unlocking the concentration of your mind. And at that point, you can achieve, you will be able to get concentrated with most Dhamma doors. Your Dhamma door doesn't really matter anymore. because you know how to concentrate your mind. But until you get there, if you keep on changing your Dharma doors, you're never going to find out. You're never going to find out the secret to the key to unlocking concentration in yourself. Okay, all right. Now, when we talk about reciting mantras and other situations, that can be when you're taking a shower, when you're eating, when you're walking, when you're driving, or sometimes someone is sick and you hear that great compassion mantra is very useful for things like that, and you want to try that out. That's a different kind of practice. So in those situations, okay, you can be, say, reciting the great compassion mantra all the time. Whenever you don't need to concentrate, like answering the phone or you're not working, you can be reciting great compassion mantra all the time, or reciting the Buddha's name all the time. Or you can move. In the morning, you may want to do something like the Medicine Master Buddha mantra. In the afternoon, you may move to reciting the Great Compassion Mantra. And then in the evening, you might want to move to the Shurangama Mantra. That's fine. Yeah, that depends on your intentions, because sometimes certain mantras, certain practices, it's easy for you to have different intentions behind them. So that's okay. But when it comes to the serious practice, when your intent is really to get into samadhi, then you want to be able to rely on one. Okay? So the context is different. So you might have someone, who every night they meditate, every morning, every night they meditate. They always use the same Dharma door when they meditate. Okay? Same one. They don't revert. They always use the same one. Whether they like it or not, whether they feel it's working or not, whether they think it's the right Dharma door or not, they go back to the very same one. But then, when they're eating, they might be reciting something else. Or they may recite the same thing. It's up to them. Or when someone else is sick, someone they know is sick, then they recite the Great Compassion Mantra. Okay? Get it? Okay, you have another question? Yes, you asked, but I'm not going to answer. I'll keep it for next week.
Yes. My next question is exactly what you just mentioned. That's how I do it. Like Great Compassion Mantra, Shrangama Mantra, Medicine Master Mantra, and I read sutras. But I'm not specific to only one mantra or one sutra. I like to read all of them. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. But like I said, if you really want to, if you want to meditate and you're sitting down or you're bowing and you want to be able, or you're doing walking meditation, okay, and you really, really want to break through your mind, and concentrate your mind, then you should stick to one. Okay, but in your case, what you just mentioned, which is what most people normally do, yeah, you can use whatever you feel is appropriate for the situation, because you're not, your intention is not to get into deep concentration. All right. Okay, so I'm going to get the rest of the mantra recitation next week. About certain rules or regulations. Do you get punished? Basically, the question was, if I don't do it and I recite the mantra, am I going to get punished? Or something like that, or ineffective, So basically, it has to do with how mantras work, and is there a difference between like the mantras and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Would the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas still help you if you don't follow the rules when you recite the mantras? So we'll keep that for next week. Okay. Anyone else with anything? If not, then we shall transfer merit. Okay. Okay, may every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay, 3 bows to the Buddha. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing in respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Alright everyone, we'll see you next week. Amrita Tov Ho.